Father, we are in your presence this afternoon, and we pray that you speak to us through the word that has been read. For our personal lives and our workplaces, so that we may be able to understand why Jesus used this parable, if it is speaking to us today, so that we can address some gaps and be able to move forward for your services. Through Jesus Christ we have prayed. Praise the Lord, church. I have already been introduced, and this afternoon we are looking at Matthew chapter 25 verses 14 to 30. I want to give this portion a different perspective from what Jesus gave it or what it intended to address. Because here Jesus uses this parable to address issues of the kingdom of heaven. I want to divert you a little bit by giving this passage a different meaning in our present working context, because it is dealing with people who are entrusted with a kind of work. We are using different versions of the Bible. Some are using NIV, others are using a Revised Standard Version, and others. And you'll find that they are addressing the issue of talent differently. In my Bible here, which I think was written from an American perspective, they use dollars. Yes. Then in others, they use talents, in others, money. But they will mean the same. My topic, I call it theology of work. The theme, using our talents, because that is the central focus of this chapter. And then the sub-theme is thank you, good and faithful servant. In this text, we have the following to think about. It addresses a number of issues, but I have just picked a few. One, the four characters mentioned here, that is the master and his three servants, who in some versions are called slaves and others are called stewards. Two, we look at the talents. Three, allocation. How these talents have been allocated to these servants. Four, utility. How they have been used. Five, accountability. Six, ability. And seven, rewards. This text gives us four people, as I have already said. The parable tells us about the utility of the talents entrusted to each of the servants for investment. It is very clear in some versions that they were given purposely for investment, especially in NIV. And it implies that before the master allocated to each of them the amount of money, he looked at each servant's ability. Verse 15, ability. We do work, we do sometimes allocated what to do. Our leaders or our masters sometimes give us what to do according to the abilities we have. They first look at you. Can you manage? So that is very essential when you are in a responsible place and you want to give people some work. You need to gauge the ability of each one, which I think the master did here. And after a period of time, the master came back requiring each of them to give accountability of how the money was used. So much as we engage work or you are given work or wherever you are, you need to be aware that there is a time when you are going to give accountability of what has been given to you. In most cases, we may not know that we have been given work because in African setting, you are born working, you grow working, you die working. And sometimes you never know that what you are doing has been allocated to you right from birth. And you forget that what you are doing is God-given, and at the end of the day, you'll have to give accountability, much as our earthly masters will always want accountability. So here, when he came back and asked for accountability, we find there are 3 responses which deal with different rewards. Number 1, in verse 20 to 23, we find positive responses. The first slave or steward reported, "Master, you gave me 5 talents or 5 pounds, and I have earned so much, twice as much." And he gave accountability to the master. And what we find here is that the master was very, very happy. And he replied, "Thank you, good and faithful servant. You have been so faithful in handling this small amount. So now I'll give you many more responsibilities. Let us celebrate together." 2 things happen here. The master was very happy about the accountability given. And he did not stop at that. He called the servant to come and they celebrate together. I don't know, most of us, we do have people who we employ or who work under us. I don't know how far you have done these 2 things. Thanking the person for what he or she has done, and then later on call the person to a cup of tea. Come and celebrate together. How many of us have celebrated with our workers? You might have been doing it, but you may find that many of us, we don't. And that is expressing our lack of appreciation of what good people do. And moreover for us, because this was the master's money, and the man has multiplied it. And he said, "You have been so faithful with little." That also brings an idea to think about. How faithful are you? And the Bible is clear is that if you cannot be faithful with little, you cannot be faithful with much. The master was very happy. These responses express trust and responsibility and positive utility that goes with positive rewards. Number 2, verses 24 to 25 are negative responses. When the master inquired from the 3rd servant, then this is what we hear. Then the servant with 1 bag or 1 talent came and said, "I knew you were a harsh man." Imagine that response. "I knew you were a harsh man. I was afraid I hid it in the earth, in the soil. I want to imagine you have a talent, which talent you are supposed to use for the good of your master and even yourself, but you hide it. There are some of us who have got talents or gifts, and we keep them in our pockets. We keep them in our houses. We don't want to share with others. We don't have any signs of showing that we have the ability to multiply. This response expresses fear and negligence and lack of responsibility. So here the third response, verses 26-28. This is the master's reaction. Number one, it expresses anger. You wicked and lazy servant. If we are now to analyze where you are working and what you are reporting, what would be the response of your master according to the accountability you are giving? Would you be thanked as good and faithful, or would you be regarded as wicked and lazy servant? And he asked, why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? This expresses rebuke and wonder. Rebuke because he was lazy and he wondered why he never deposited it in the bank. Then the master ordered for a reward. And this reward is different from the first reward. Take the money from this servant and give it to the one with 10 bags. To those who use well what they have been given, even more will be given. And they will have abundance and celebrate with the master. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. And they will be thrown into darkness, where they will weep and gnash their teeth. This is another indirect way of saying they will be discontinued from work. Because if you can look through, if this man, what he had has been taken away from him, he has no work. And moreover, he has not been working because he had hidden his talent in the earth. Lack of using our talents results into, one, keeping our relationship with our master. Keeping away our relationship with our master. 2, poverty. 3, losing the little we have. 4, social isolation. 5, spiritual focus. If you analyze all these, you'll find them in this portion. Because we know work is God's work. So if you lose spiritual focus, then you will not be able to use the talents that have been given to you. We are living in the world of work, and each one of us is a worker of one kind or the other. God has given us responsibilities and equipped us with the ability to do them. All of us, as you see in this room and outside there, we are doing different works. And each one of us has been given capacity to manage, ability to be productive. However, the volume of the work given to us is not the same. Some are given less and others more. Some, their work is easy, while others, it is hard and too much. However, according to the work before each one of us as workers, God has already evaluated our abilities to do it. When you sit with a number of people who are working in different areas, sometimes they will say, my work. When somebody begins talking about his or her work, either he's saying it is too much, or it's very bad, or something not well paying. But that's where God has placed you. And that's where God knows that from there you can go somewhere else. Because the other one who had 5 made 10, and now something is being added on. So when you are contented with what God has given you and you do it efficiently, using the ability that God has given you, it means now that you are measuring up to getting more. There are people who have been much timing, much timing. They have been at the same place for years, no movement, no backwards, no forwards. In place, maybe God is saying, you cannot move from here because you don't have the ability to move forward. You have kept the talent given to you. Maybe the best thing is to remove even what you have. You have had many people going home with no reason. They are not sick. They have not made their retirement age, but they have been terminated. Reason, look through. In this parable, the understanding was that the 3 servants were given what the master deemed to be within their abilities. I have been persuaded to think that the master had inwardly known that the 3rd servant was not good enough to be entrusted with much. And sometimes this happens. Your boss may look at you and say, I think this one cannot handle. Let us give it to the other one. You find some people having more work to do when for you having less, because they have the ability to do it. As workers, we must know that what has been allocated to us is based on our abilities to perform. We must understand the extent of our abilities and guard against jealousy or envy for those who have been given more. In verse 24, it expresses 2 problems of the 3rd servant. 1, wickedness. 2, laziness. But also could be envy or jealousy as to why he was given little while others got much. And that happens in our workplaces. You look around, you are not working alone. We have so many people. You look at the other, I think that one has been given good office. I think that one has been given good work, and so on. That one has been given less. And when you start looking at that one, you develop wickedness in you. You become lazy, even not doing the little that has been given to you, like we have seen the other person. These problems have always affected our work and workplaces, failing to understand what we ought to do with what has been entrusted to us. No matter where you are placed to work, you have been equipped to do it. But when you overlook your position and type of work, then you miss the purpose of your calling. All of us are called, but we are called to do different types of work. I would like us to turn our attention to our nation, Uganda, and our church of the province of Uganda, commonly known as Church of Uganda. For those who have been here longer, you understand what I'm saying. Uganda has been endowed with the best fertile soils in the heart of Africa. We have strong, active natives to be able to use these fertile soils where we can grow coffee, cotton, matoke, sorghum, even graze cows. It has rich minerals, and it has become a tourism attraction. In spite of all this, Uganda is among the poorest nations of the world. On 2nd October 2020, Uganda was among the poorest countries in the world. The current International Monetary Fund report 2022 has put Uganda 14th of the 15 poorest countries of the world, while it is 13 out of 54 African countries. And at independence, Uganda had 3 enemies to fight against. One was ignorance, the second disease, and the third was poverty. While others, on average, have been dealt with, one wonders why, after 61 years of independence, this particular enemy of poverty has taken the frontline position more than ever before and has gained ground every year. And yet the fertile soils still exist. The population has increased and literacy has been reduced. It has been researched and found out that more than 50% of Uganda's population are youth with immense energy, but redundant and lazy, spending their youthful time in leisure and eating, demanding expenditure without production. And therefore it has been analyzed that few people work to feed many. Bishop Tucker, who was the Bishop of Eastern Equatorial Africa between 1890 to 1899, and then became the first Bishop of Uganda 1899 to 1911, had 3 propositions for the growth of the church in Uganda, for creating self-reliant church. He wanted the future church of Uganda to be 1, self-governing, 2, self-propagating, and 3, self-sustaining. Whereas the first 2 have been realized to a greater extent, the third self that deals with self-sustainability has failed. The church has remained with a begging attitude since its independence of self-governing in 1964. And yet Church of Uganda is known to be one of the biggest landowners in Uganda, with a minimum population of 32.0%, translating into 11.8 million of 39.1 million in 2014. One would ask why Uganda as a country and the Church of Uganda, after their independence from the colonial rule, are poor and still beg for financial support. Have they utilized the land resources or talent and abilities optimally? What has gone wrong? The problem begins with our individual preconceived poverty. Ladies and gentlemen, if you asked in this room, maybe it may not be, but you ask how many people who are poor, you put up hands. You see people putting up hands. And sometimes I look at the person putting up a hand, and I look at the tie, I look at the trousers, I say, this person poor. Then when you visit our rooms where we sleep, our homes where you find people have things and they call themselves poor. So the question here is a question of wonder, you know? Because we have preconceived poverty, putting blame on what we own as individuals with poor mentality that has been referred to as poverty of the head, poverty of the heart, and poverty of the hands. When we fail to use our brains to think that any talent is as good as other talents, then we miss the point. Think about the story given in Matthew chapter 4, verse 31 about the mustard seed. So small, sometimes you may not even see it. But when it is planted, you know what comes out of it. But sometimes when they give it to you, you may reject it and you want a big seed. A big seed. Maybe like groundnut, maybe like coffee, which may translate into so many small seeds of the mustard seed. But when it is planted, it grows and becomes, one would not really think that what he sees of a tree has come from that seed. That makes that we fail our achievements and rewards when we cannot use our talents. We need to contemplate on how far our abilities can be used for the productivity of our talents, both in church and countries. The complaint of the third servant in verse 24 seemed to suggest that he was saying, why did you give me less than others? And sometimes that comes in our minds. You look around, you say, but that one is not like me. That one has more, that one has less. But remember, as I said, God had already looked at you that you don't have the ability to handle. That's why you have what you have. Yes or no? I may not have answer for you, but ask God why. He will answer you. Jesus one time asked his disciples, because they came and approached him and said, can you allow me to sit on the right, another one on the left? He looked at them. He said, can you? This is the question he asked. Are you able to be baptized with the baptism of suffering? I must be baptized with. They jumped up and said, yes. But what he was asking, do you have the ability to die for others? Are you going to go through the suffering I have? Because you see, some of the people whose responsibilities you are cherishing and you want to have, you don't know the pain they are suffering. I can assure you, my friend, I don't know what your name is. If we exchanged our roles for a day, I think I can come back in the evening running and say, please take. I can't manage. And you hand over mine. So sometimes when you look at what others are doing, you think it is easy. It is not easy. We had a man here, rest in eternal peace. Before we were what we have, he was a man who maintained all toilets around. Those who were here, they know him. And he did his work cheerfully. I was happy that before he exited, he was honored with a plaque, I'm sure. He was on. The man did not care. He did it. And that's why some of us survived. Otherwise, we would have died here because of whatever. Not corona, not Ebola, but others. But there are some times when you are given that kind of work, you say, me? Yeah, So Jesus was asking these people, do you have the ability to suffer like I have? Oftentimes, we want to take or have what others have or more than what we have, not knowing that our talents are God-given according to the abilities He gives to each one of us. But note must be taken that for each talent that God has given us, goes with accountability and rewards. You have it, or you may want to have it, but be aware that there is accountability and rewards. And we have seen two different types of rewards, the positive and the negative one. So what kind of reward do you expect? Look what you have been doing, what God has given you. There are some times when people say, for me, I have nothing. There is no one here who has nothing. All of us have something to offer. The book of Genesis pre-exposes this text by telling us that we were created and given responsibilities to be productive. Genesis chapter 1, verse 28b, where it says, be fruitful and multiply. Fruitfulness and multiplication are not only in terms of procreation or making money, but also in all the work God gave us. Utilize your talents that God has given you. Today, you are called upon to examine how we have utilized our talents in order to support our families, communities, churches, and our countries. When we deny our hearts from thinking, our hearts from discerning, I say when we deny our heads from thinking and our hearts from discerning, we deny our hands from working. Some people who used to listen to Bukede TV, there was a man called Tugusulwa. He said, you are not poor. It is? Yeah, I'm not hearing it. It is your head that is. But the head will not work alone. The head will work with the heart. And then they relay a message to the hand and the hand begins working. So when you don't do that, then you fail the hand from working. God will not be happy. Instead, he will reduce on what we have and increase for those who have understood the theology of work, that ability plus utility equals accountability plus reward. I repeat, ability plus utility equals accountability plus reward. With a thank you, good and faithful servant. To God be the glory.